Too fat to fly. Delta Airlines and others under fire after they allegedly tell a female passenger she's too fat to fly on their airline. Straight out to senior reporter with MailOnline.com, David Martusco. David, thank you for being with us. It's hard for me to take in that they would actually say the words, "You're just too fat to fly."
Well, what happened is that this woman, Vilma Soltaj, she lived in New York and wanted a vacation in Hungary and got over there just fine in an aircraft. But 3 different airlines refused to fly her back because she was too fat to fly, they said. She bought 2 seats, but they couldn't manage to get her in any of the aircraft.
So after she goes to all the trouble, David, to buy 2 seats. They fly her one way successfully. They won't fly her back.
Well, she tried 3 times, 3 different airlines, and of course, after the 3rd failure, she died in Hungary 2 days later. But first she tried with KLM Royal Dutch Airlines, and this was the airline she flew over to Hungary on. They got her on the airplane just fine, but she was unable to get from the wheelchair into the row of seats because the seat backs didn't recline. And nobody offered to get her into another row, but here she is. She physically can't cram herself into the row. And so the captain said, you know, it's not going to work. You got to go. Now, the very next day, Delta tried to get her out, but they said ultimately, after they gave her a boarding pass and everything, they said, I'm sorry, we don't have the equipment to get you, to hoist you up through the back door of the plane, which is how we have to do it. So they send her home again. Now, fast forward 6 days later, she tries to get home with her husband on Lufthansa through Germany. They get her on the plane. I hate to laugh. This is actually, if it weren't so sad, it would be comical. They get her on the airplane, and then it's taking so long to get her in the seat that the other passengers are going to miss their connections in Germany. So again, the airline says this is taking too long. You simply can't board. So they send her back, and 2 days later, she was found dead in Hungary.
To Mary Schiavo, aviation lawyer and former inspector general with the Department of Transportation. Mary, I don't find it laughable. I find that it's upsetting. It's upsetting because I know that she was horribly embarrassed. I know she couldn't move around very well. I know that. I know a lot of people will go into the whole fat shaming thing. I feel bad for her. I feel horrible for her. And to have her, if Delta couldn't get her on the airline physically, I kind of understand that. But with the first airline, where there were seats available that could recline so she could maneuver into the seat, but no one made that possible for her, I mean, I think that could be a legitimate complaint against that airline. That was not Delta, that was the other one.
Right. That was the first one. That was KLM. And this is one of those legal cases, as you're all too familiar with, where the devil is in the details. And our sympathies certainly go out to this woman and her husband. What a horrible thing to have happen. But at each step of the way, our sympathies run afoul of the air safety regulations. For example, with the first flight with KLM, they had equipment to manage to get her on board. And remember, the airlines don't have a duty if they take you someplace to bring you home. Particularly in this case, the facts say that the woman fell ill and gained weight while on the vacation. So an even tougher case to get her home. But what happened on KLM is they said, well, once they maneuvered her on there, they didn't have seat extenders long enough at this juncture to safely secure her in the seats, and the seat backs wouldn't hold. At that point, safety regulations don't allow you to fly. If the seat back won't hold and they don't have a seat extender, you must deplane, no matter what your size or height. The one on Delta is very interesting because Delta would, of course, have the U.S. regulations. U.S. regulations are very clear that airline employees may not lift a passenger into a seat. You can put them in a wheelchair. There are different hoisting mechanisms. There's actually a sling that some airlines have if you're too big for the jetway. But then you have to fit on the little wheelchair, get down the aisle, and then you must be able to get into your seat. And Delta didn't have that equipment overseas in Hungary to do that. And they couldn't just pick her up and carry her. And then the third airline, which was 6 or 7 days later, it took several firefighters and medics to get her to her row, but then she could not get into her seat. And once again, that airline had rules similar to Delta. And at that point, so another set of laws kicked in. You know, aviation is just full of laws. At that point, the European Union rules kick in, and if you delay a flight for over 2 hours, then the airline, or 3 hours, depending upon the flight and the distance, then the airline owes payments to everyone on board. At that point, they'd already expended 2 hours.
Oh, wait a minute. I guess we should all move to Europe. Every time a plane is delayed 2 or 3 hours, you get money. Ooh, I'd be a millionaire by now, Mary. Okay, all I have to say, Mary, is you certainly told me, because I did not know all that about airline legalities. And the way you lay it out so plainly. David Martosco, senior reporter, mailonline.com. David, I know that Mary is legally correct, but somehow in my heart, I feel like the whole thing was just wrong. And if I could be on that jury, and I know up here Mary's right, I feel so bad for this lady. I would absolutely have to find in her favor. I can't help it.
Well, I'm with you on this, actually. You know, I in the last 10 years, I've lost about a third of my body weight. I used to have to go on airline flights and request a belt extender. I mean, it's horribly embarrassing, and nobody should have to go through that. It's got to be terrible for her husband, too, to have to...
And you know another thing, David? We don't know why she's overweight. We don't know if she has an illness or some type of disorder. You know, when you see an obese person, everyone says, oh, well, just don't eat. Just work out. You know what? It's not that easy for them.
No, it's definitely not that simple.
Food addiction is just like other addictions, if that was the nature of her weight gain. I don't know. I just feel so sorry for her. So where does it stand now? I know that there was a $6 million lawsuit filed. What's happening now?
Well, the lawsuit's been settled. I mean, this whole thing happened back in October of 2012, and there's been a settlement reached. The details of it are, not, of course, not available. I'm sure that the husband who originally sued has been instructed as a condition of the settlement to not reveal any details. But he sued the three airlines. He's been paid something. Yeah, it's settled. It's not going to see a jury.
It's just a shame it never settled while this woman was still alive, clearly very, very ill. Okay, told too fat to fly, landed a $6 million lawsuit.